Hello and welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about the Japanese section and its operation in the field, what made it up, and we'll see how it operates in action when performing the section attack. So first, a little bit about the Japanese soldier, about the Japanese section in itself. So the Japanese section was made up of 12 to 13 men, bearing in mind that most military units tended actually to go into combat under strength after either taking casualties through disease, injury, or various other logistical means. So it's more common to see Japanese units maybe at 10 to 12 rather than the full 13 men. Now, the Japanese soldier would have been armed with the Arasaka rifle, normally, of the various different iterations throughout the war. Some units could have been armed with the Chinese rifle, which was a variant, a homebrewed model of the Kar 98, I believe. Although these were mainly Japanese Korean units, as in units of Korean people who were conscripted into the Japanese Imperial Army throughout the war. NCOs, despite popular opinion, quite often section leaders and other NCO section leaders would have been armed with a rifle as well, although in most other countries it was common to be armed with a submachine gun. Although Japan did develop their own submachine gun, they were late to the game and had never had large numbers of them, so more often than not it would be. Now I'm going to just say a bit on the popularity of Japanese NCOs, officers using and carrying what people may misleadingly call a katana. Every Japanese officer, commissioned officer, would have carried and would have had a sword. It was not a katana, but a katana is the longer variant. I mean, the shorter Japanese variant. This sword was an intermediate one. Intermediate in between both the size of the smaller Japanese sword and the larger katana. They would have not been ancestral swords, as people believed, because this design of sword came about in the Meiji period, came in, they were, well, when the Japanese army modernized itself in line with European armies. So although there were people who were from samurai backgrounds and did have ancestral swords and stuff, they wouldn't have carried them into combat because they'd have got rusted and damaged and lost. And why would you lose? It's like taking your grandmother's jewellery into combat with you wearing that, but you wouldn't. So, and as well, the katana and its smaller counterpart were just not suited for modern combat. As well, our section leader here, the chap at the front, is not armed with a sword. That's because he would be a corporal rather than a sergeant. The sergeants were one to the platoon, and they would have been presented with, if he did have one, he would have had to attend the Japanese NCO Academy and then been presented one on passing out, which most low-ranking, like entry-level NCOs wouldn't have. So he's accompanied, so he would lead the section forward. So that is, he can be at the front and on point to react to threats. Now this is textbook, I don't know how often that did happen, but it also means he's then the first person that comes into contact with any possible enemy. He's assisted by his duties by the assistant section commander, who would be armed likewise with an Arasaka rifle. Then there are two other people in their command section with them. They could be runners or just more riflemen to bring weapons bare, because being the section leader, he would be, unlike the platoon leader, would be expected to take an active part in the fighting. Now behind them you have the forward section. Some Western armies called this the gun group, because it would be a you have the Type 99, Type 100, I believe, LMG in there, and 3 other members who would be ammunition bearers, barrel bearers, spotters, etc., to keep the gun well fed. And behind them you have the rear section, and they are just 4 riflemen, and they'll be most likely employed in the assault phase of the section attack, and they would be carrying it forwards. So that's a little bit about the Japanese section. So we're going to see how they react to when they are under fire in situation. We're going to see the Japanese play out their classic form of attack, of enveloping their opponent. So that would be pinning them down. Once they're pinned, outflanking them, and then attacking them. And we're going to see how they employ their various weapon systems in the fight. So just move the camera slightly, zoom it out. So here we can see a single house. See it? Now, inside there is a brain gun team. You have the brain gun gunner, and then a assistant gunner and ammunition bearer, and another man with them. Now, a Japanese unit would come around the corner in their line, and as soon as they came around the corner, they have been, in our scenario here, they have been contacted by the enemy. The brain gun has open fired at them, and all hell has broken loose. So now, what first thing would happen would be everybody would dive to the side of the trail. And take cover. Normally for the Japanese, that would be in the prone position. And the section leader would then wait. And if they had, so to cover, they would start to return fire with what they could. And the section leader would then have to give orders out to where he sees fit. So being here, you can see engaged by the gun over there. So he's decided, he knows he needs to first suppress the enemy position. I'm going to outflank it on each side to take it out. So what he's going to do is he's going to get his gun team, which is hiding here, to move to the other side of the trail underneath covering fire provided by the command group, to begin to lay suppressing fire with their LMG on them. I'm just going to go do that. Gun team goes over here. Taking what cover they can within the foliage, and the Type 99 begins to attempt to suppress the brain gun. Now we hear a lot of talk about different guns, about the comparing like the brain to the to the bar, to MG 34, MG 44, Now, in real terms, it doesn't make that much difference what machine gun you're being shot at when you're being shot at by a machine gun. So, in theory, they should have, the Japanese section here should have fire superiority over the British fire team there. So they'll just start with exchange and carry on. Now the Japanese, after possibly suppressing it, or whilst they are trying to suppress it, the sectional leader would then begin his outflanking manoeuvre. So what he's going to do is, again, showing how practicality can stray from doctrine. The section leader here and the assistant section leader there, we're going to split up. The section leader is going to take the rest of the command group. I'm going to borrow 2 men from the gun team to outflank this way. Our section leader is going to run across here, take the rear section and advance round here. The Japanese army is a shock army. They base their offences on rapid manoeuvres and with surprise and aggression, which does mean they're easy to stop, but hopefully in this situation we'll see how we do. So assistant section leaders will go over there and begin to take this section, this group, to advance through the jungle that side, and the section leader is going to take the rest of the command group and 2 of the men from the gun team to begin his own outflanking manoeuvre. Now we're going to say, because there's less undergrowth and they're more exposed on this side, that they are going to take a couple of casualties. Gonna knock him over. It's going to take a couple of casualty coming through there. Could take possibly no if a machine gun turns to fire at them. So the section commander has led his men up that flank. The assistant section leader's got more cover, so he's getting his men closer. And now they will try and move as close as they could to the target, the gun position, while staying concealed, while it's continuing to be suppressed by the LMG over there. And then once they'd hopefully managed to outflank it, they would begin to fire into the position to suppress it more. Maybe throw, as well, if they're in range, which look like they are here, throw a grenade in there, and the grenade would go off, and then rush the position. One section would rush the position. Probably that would have been predetermined or been determined by a bugle call. Rush the position and take it out with grenades and bayonets. Being the Japanese, the stereotype of them, well, it's not a stereotype, it's fact, wouldn't probably take them prisoners, wounded, been bayoneted, etc. And then they would have, after doing a section attack, bearing in mind they've only taken out 3 people here, when a section would have taken, had about 8 to 10 men in for the Brits, and would be in a larger platoon of 3 sections. They would then be expecting a counter-attack possibly, or they'll be looking to move on, so they'll want to reorganise quite quickly, so they will come back out into the open. They would assess the wounded to see how badly they were wounded, and would either leave them behind with some people. So we'll say they will be put into the aid station, or into the house to become the aid station, whereas people would be left behind, and the section would reform up in its previous formation. With a person or 2 people left behind, possibly none. If they knew they had people coming right up behind them, might just patch them up and leave them and continue their advance through the jungle on their own. So that is a Japanese section attack. I thought I'd use models to make it a bit interesting. Make it more visually pleasing, possibly. Sorry if I rambled a bit, but yeah, that is a Japanese section and Japanese section attack.